Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. So my channel is all about sharing with you advice and kind of best practice for learning foreign languages, encouraging you to learn languages at home and giving you all the different kind of tips and strategies that I've tried learning languages myself. So in today's video, I'm going to discuss a topic which is a very hot topic, something that many people ask me about and something that comes up in conversations a lot in the comments underneath my other videos. And it's basically about how to learn and maintain several languages at the same time. So for some reason, a lot of people who follow me on YouTube actually are learning more than one foreign language, or they want to learn more than one foreign language at the same time, and they're wondering how they can do it effectively. So I've got separate videos about whether or not it's a good idea to learn 2 or more languages at the same time. There are some pros and cons of each approach, but obviously you might want to just give it a go and see how it goes for you. So hopefully you can use some of the tips I share in this video to make sure that you're successful. So let's get started. So the first tip I've got for you is that when you're learning several languages at the same time, you need to kind of make sure that you separate those languages in some way, because otherwise you might end up either getting a little bit confused, or you might basically devote too much time to one language and not enough time to another language, and then it won't really be like you're learning 2 languages at the same time, but you're learning just one language and then a little bit of another one, or multiple kind of bits of multiple languages. So you want to make sure that you are kind of somehow marking almost like a distinction between those languages. And one way to do that is to have a separate routine associated with each language that you're learning or that you're trying to maintain, because obviously once you've learned a language, it's not really done. You still have to kind of be exposed to that language and practice listening, practice reading it, to make sure that you keep it, you maintain it. So what I mean by routine is there might be certain things that you do during your day. So for example, you might be getting a bus to go to work, and that is part of your routine. So you can associate one of the languages you're learning with that particular routine. So for example, whenever I get on the bus, I'm going to be studying German vocabulary, and I'm going to only be doing that on the bus. And then you can have another routine which is basically, for example, associated with preparing dinner. You might want to listen to podcasts in French, and that way you're associating that specific routine with the language and you're minimizing the risk of confusing the 2 languages. Okay, the second tip is using personas. So a persona is basically almost like a character that you create, so you can kind of distinguish between those languages again. So for example, if you're learning French, you can think of like a French character. It can be a character from a movie that you've seen, or maybe a book that you've read, or maybe just something that you make up. And you kind of start acting like that character whenever you practice speaking, whenever you're learning new vocabulary and saying things out loud. Do it in a specific way. Try to kind of act like that character. So you're almost like an actor trying to portray a character. And then if you're learning Spanish at the same time, you can create a Spanish character that way. Or if you're learning English, you can create an English character. So you've got multiple different characters that you're using. Okay, my third tip is about learning the basics. So I definitely recommend that if you're learning several languages at the same time, that you learn the basics of each language first. Because once you've got the basics, it is much easier to get motivated and less likely that you will give up any of the languages. So if you really want to make sure that you succeed as a multiple language learner, then make sure that you really work on the basics. So learn about the structure of the language, the pronunciation, the syntax, a little bit of grammar, how to use the present tense, how to conjugate verbs. Learn some basic phrases that you can use in conversations, some basic vocabulary. And once you've done that, you can move on to more kind of advanced aspects of each language. Okay, my next tip is about choosing languages where you have different levels of proficiency in each of them. So that can be actually quite helpful because that really helps you make a distinction between the languages. So it might be that it's kind of like a contradictory tip to the one I've just given you about learning the basics. Learning the basics would apply to when you're starting several languages at the same time. But it might be that you actually already know some languages and you just want to add some other languages to the mix. So depending on your learning style, it might be that this approach would work better for you. So for example, having a language that you're quite proficient in as one of the languages, then another language where you're kind of at the intermediate level, and then you pick up a third language, which is kind of like a completely new language for you. And that will basically help you, again, make a distinction between those languages because you will be doing slightly different things for each of them because the level of proficiency that you have in each of them is slightly different. Okay, my next tip, again, has two different kind of aspects depending on what type of language learner you are, what type of person you are. So it's to do with the similarity between languages. So it might be that you might find it easier to learn languages which are kind of similar to each other. So for example, if you're learning French, then it might be that learning Spanish and Italian at the same time works well for you because there are lots of things that those languages share in terms of grammar, in terms of vocabulary, and it might be actually a good idea for you to do that. For other people, something that would work is choosing languages which are completely different from each other. So again, that would help you create that distinction between the languages. So if you're learning French, then don't choose another Romance language, but choose something different. So maybe Russian or Cantonese, something that's kind of very different to the language that you're already learning. And that might be a helpful tip for you. But again, like I said, it's something that will depend on your individual learning style and the way you kind of prefer to learn yourself. Okay, my next tip is quite a basic one, but incredibly important, and it's about scheduling it in. So making sure that you've got study time scheduled into your diary every single week, because if you don't do that, the thing that I mentioned at the start of the video might happen to you, which is focusing a lot on one language and then kind of ignoring the other one or ignoring the other languages that you're learning. So make sure that you really, if you really want to be serious about learning 3 languages, then make sure that you have equal amounts of time that you divide to each language. And scheduling it in, actually putting in an appointment in your diary is a really great way to do that because that encourages you to treat it as an appointment, almost as a meeting or like a doctor's visit or something like that. Once it's in there, once you've got a reminder, it's more difficult to miss it. Okay, and the final one is quite similar to the kind of routines and personas tip that I gave you at the start of the video. So this is about changing your environments. So making sure that you have a different environment for each of the languages that you're studying. It doesn't have to involve leaving the house and studying in the park or studying on the bus. You can just stay at home and you can have a different study environment for each of the languages. You can use your kitchen for one language, you can use your bedroom for another language. And that way you're again creating a distinction between those languages, something that kind of allows you to differentiate between them and to associate the learning with that specific location. So I hope that these tips will help you learn multiple languages at the same time. And I've got a question for you, and I want you to answer it in the comments. So my question is, do you think it's a good idea to learn multiple languages at the same time? If you've experienced it, share your experiences in the comments. If you haven't, just let me know what you think. Do you think it's good or do you think it's bad? And thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Bye!